War, in its essence, is a clash of wills. But in the sodden, fever-drenched jungles of the Pacific during the Second World War, it became something more profound, a collision of two irreconcilable souls. One believed victory was forged in the furnace of the human spirit, a force that could triumph over mere matter. The other placed its faith in the cool, relentless precision of the machine. This is the story of how that clash was decided, not in the war rooms of admirals, nor the grand strategies of generals, but in the sudden, violent intimacy of the night, at 30 yards, by a weapon that spoke with the voice of thunder and carried the force of a storm. It is the story of how a tool designed for hunting waterfowl became the brutal arbiter of a philosophical conflict, shattering centuries of warrior tradition with the impersonal efficiency of American industry. Private Kenta Tanaka was 19 when he arrived at the Imperial Army Academy in 1941. A son of Nagano, from a family of farmers who had worked the same land for generations. Like tens of thousands of his countrymen, he was the product of a nation that had deliberately woven the ancient code of the samurai, Bushido, into the very fabric of its modern military identity. The way of the warrior is death. It was not a metaphor. It was a manual for life and for combat. This philosophy, rooted in the Meiji Restoration's fusion of feudal loyalty and modern nationalism, created a soldier who saw himself as the spiritual heir to the samurai. His weapon was not merely a tool, it was an extension of his soul, and the bayonet was its purest expression, the final argument in any debate of arms. The doctrine was explicit, drilled into his muscle memory 32 hours each week, until the thrust, the parry, the killing stroke, became as natural as breathing. This was the soul of the Imperial Japanese Army, the embodiment of Yamato Damashi, the unique and unconquerable Japanese spirit. Marksmanship, by contrast, was a technical afterthought. Only 8 hours of weekly training. The 1942 Infantry Manual stated it with blunt certainty. The spiritual strength of the Japanese soldier makes one man equal to 10 enemies. Western soldiers, corrupted by material comfort and individualism, cannot withstand the shock of cold steel. This was not empty rhetoric. It was the foundation of all Japanese small unit tactics. The goal was never to outshoot the enemy, but to overwhelm him psychologically, to close the distance where technology melted before pure human resolve. The belief ran deep. Not mere propaganda for the public, but the bedrock of their tactical soul. Internal assessments from 1941 dismissed American forces as spiritually weak, dependent on machines, incapable of matching the Japanese warrior in the ultimate test of courage. Colonel Masanobu Tsuji, ruthless, brilliant architect of Japan's Malayan campaign, wrote, "The Americans hide behind their machines. When forced to fight man-to-man, they crumble like wet paper. Their morale cannot withstand the sight of our blades. They are a consumer society, valuing their own lives too highly to sacrifice them as we do." The evidence, to their eyes, was overwhelming. Written in the lightning victories of those early months. In China, screaming bayonet charges had shattered superior forces time and again. In the Philippines, American and Filipino troops fled before the terrifying spectacle of the banzai attack, their lines dissolving under psychological shock. And at Singapore, 30,000 British troops surrendered to a Japanese force less than half their size. A victory achieved not by siege, but by relentless pressure. That convinced the defenders further resistance was futile. Every Japanese soldier memorized the Bushido principle. They trained to embrace combat at arm's length, where spirit mattered more than production. While Americans counted their ammunition, Japanese soldiers counted the hours spent perfecting the final decisive lunge. They believed they had rediscovered a truth their enemies had forgotten. Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake, commanding the 17th Army in the Solomons, summed it up in an order to his troops, October 1943. As the campaign on Bougainville began, night belongs to the Japanese soldier, he declared. In darkness, when American technology fails and their machines fall silent, our spiritual superiority becomes absolute. One Japanese soldier with a bayonet, his heart pure, is worth a full squad of Americans with their clattering guns. They are afraid of the dark because they are afraid of themselves. We are not. We own the night. That was the confidence, the armor, of the Japanese infantryman as he prepared for battle. And so, on a humid, moonlit night in November 1943, Private Tanaka, now a hardened veteran of the 23rd Infantry Regiment, moved with his 11-man squad through the dense jungle of Bougainville Island. The air was thick, heavy, a wet cloth pressed against the face, laden with the sweet, rotten scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. In his hands, he held the Type 38 Arisaka rifle, its long, polished bayonet a comforting weight, a symbol of his purpose. He had done this many times. The routine was ritual, the silence, a weapon, the darkness, a shield. From afar came the lazy rumble of American artillery, harassment fire, blindly wasting shells on empty jungle. He smiled in the darkness, grim, confident. Let them waste their precious industry. Soon his squad would be among them. Silent shadows from the blackness, bayonets finding flesh in crowded foxholes. The Americans always broke when the cold steel came. They feared the dark. But for Tanaka, the darkness was an ally. They were the night itself. That confidence was his armor, forged in 3 years of war across 1,000 islands. He knew the sounds of battle, the sharp crack of a Springfield, the stuttering rip of a Thompson, the heavy thud of a Browning automatic rifle. Each sound could be understood, countered, overcome, with speed, aggression, unbreakable spirit. He tightened his grip on the rifle, feeling the solid wood, the cold steel of the bayonet. This was his key to victory. It had never failed him before. Then, without warning, the world exploded, a sound that had no place in his understanding of war. Not outside him, but inside his skull. A roaring, shredding thunder that overwhelmed every sense. The jungle to his left, a wall of green, simply ceased to exist. Splinters, red mist, hanging where his friend had stood a heartbeat before. Where Corporal Sato had shared rice with him that evening. There was only emptiness. The thunder had spoken. And in its wake it left not just death, but incomprehension. The rules had changed, and he did not yet know what the new rules were. The first, unheeded warnings of this new thunder had come a year earlier, on a hellish, malaria-ridden island called Guadalcanal. The United States Marines, thrown into their first major ground offensive, were learning the hard, bloody lessons of combating the Japanese night fighter. They were surrounded, outnumbered, operating on a shoestring. In their arsenal, however, was a weapon from a previous war. A tool adapted with the brutal pragmatism that would come to define the American war effort in the Pacific. They reached into their past to find an answer for this new kind of combat. The Winchester Model, 97, a pump-action shotgun born in the age of horse cavalry and perfected in the trenches of the Western Front. The Marines, with their typical practicality, sawed down its barrel and christened it the trench broom. A weapon made for the close-quarters hell of France, now reborn in the steaming jungles of the Pacific. They did not try to match spirit for spirit. They sought a tool that made spirit irrelevant. The mathematics were simple, brutal, and perfect for the jungle. Each 12-gauge shell held 9 pellets of double-aught buckshot, 9 separate bullets fired at once. At 30 yards, those 9 pellets spread into a circle the size of a dinner plate. Where a rifleman aimed carefully at one man, a shotgunner only had to point. In the chaos of a night attack, it was the ultimate point and shoot weapon. A democracy of violence, delivering lethal force without discrimination. A Marine who was there that night, Corporal Jim Bradley, recalled the memory decades later, his voice still heavy. "They came out of the Kenai grass that night. A line of them, screamin' and hollerin'. You could see the moonlight glinting on their bayonets. It was like something from another century. At 30 yards, I just started pumping. Chunk, chunk, boom. Chunk, chunk, boom. It was like scything wheat. They fell in waves. You weren't shooting at a man. You were shooting at a zone. And anything that stepped into that zone ceased to be." This was a new kind of war, utterly alien to the disciplined precision of the Japanese soldier. The reaction was disbelief, horror, moral outrage. Private Kenji Nakamura, one of only 3 survivors from Sergeant Takahashi's squad, scribbled in his diary, trying to make sense of the senseless. Sergeant Takahashi simply disappeared. Where he had been, there was only red mist and shredded leaves. The thunderstick spoke again, a terrible roar, and Corporal Ito was thrown backward as if struck by an invisible giant. This is not a weapon of war. It is a tool of demons. It kills without discrimination, without a target, without giving a man the chance to face his enemy. To them, the weapon violated every unwritten rule of combat. Captain Akira Yamamoto's report from August 1942 described it as a weapon of multiple projectiles, devastatingly effective at night combat range, wielded without honor by Marines who refused to fight proper combat. His solution was tragically predictable: increase spiritual determination, move faster through the kill zone. The system could not process this new reality. It doubled down on its beliefs. The high command, far from the front, dismissed the reports. To them, it was merely a terror weapon, proof of American cowardice, confirmation of their spiritual inferiority. General Hyakutaka's staff concluded that the shotgun was a crutch for men who lacked the courage for proper man-to-man combat. Orders followed. Spiritual strength and speed will overcome any mechanical device. The deadly lessons of Guadalcanal, written in blood, were ignored. The Japanese army looked into a mirror and saw only what it wished to see. By mid-1943, the evidence was a torrent, impossible to dismiss. On islands like New Georgia, the shotgun was no novelty. It was central to the American defense. The battles were no longer fights. They were slaughters. The Americans had built killing zones, interlocking fields of fire where shotguns and automatic weapons formed a wall of metal nothing could cross. In the field hospitals, Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, chief surgeon of the 17th Field Hospital, recorded a new horror. He called it shotgun syndrome. Battlefield medicine had been designed for single, high-velocity wounds. Clean entry, clean exit. The shotgun made something else, something medieval. 9, sometimes 12 separate wound channels. Tissue, bone, organ, shredded. The hydrostatic shock alone killed men outright. Limbs gone, torsos obliterated. Dr. Tanaka wrote with grim precision, damage consistent with an artillery burst, not a small arms weapon. When statisticians compiled the numbers, the truth was chilling. Night attacks that once succeeded 1/3 of the time, now succeeded none. Casualties climbed above 85%, often near total annihilation. The shotgun was not just killing men. It was annihilating entire units. It turned courage into a liability. Colonel Tei Ito, a veteran of China and the Philippines, wrote in his journal, "Our night attacks have become formalized suicide. The Americans have made the darkness their ally. They have turned the night, our greatest weapon, into a killing ground of their own. We send our best men to die not for strategy, but to prove a point already proven false. We are sacrificing our army on the altar of our own dogma." It was the voice of a professional soldier watching his command destroyed for nothing. The final lesson came at Bougainville, at a place called Cape Torokina. November 7th, 1943. Major Chujiro's battalion, 850 men trained in night infiltration, launched a massive assault on Marine positions held by the 3rd Raider Battalion. A textbook operation, the culmination of everything they had learned. Sergeant Yukio Mishima was there. He survived only by chance, lying motionless for hours beneath the torn bodies of his friends, feeling the warmth leave their limbs. His testimony stripped away the last illusion of glory. "We could not close the distance," he said. "It was impossible." At 40 meters, the thunder began. It came from everywhere at once. A continuous roar. Men fell in groups, not singly. They were swept away. The jungle itself exploded with metal. I saw Lieutenant Hagawa, a brave man, take a blast to the chest. His chest opened like a red flower. There was no contest, no test of spirit against spirit, and there was only execution. We were not soldiers in battle, and we were cattle in a slaughterhouse. The 17th Army's intelligence section recorded the numbers. 89% of casualties were shotgun wounds. Average range, 25 meters. Average time to annihilation, 4 minutes. The report concluded, "Enemy automatic weapons and shotguns have negated our historical advantage in night combat and spiritual strength." Lieutenant Colonel Susumu Nishida, one of the few survivors, wrote privately, "We have been teaching our men to bring swords to a thunderstorm. The Americans fight without Bushido, it is true, but they fight to win. Unless we abandon our cherished tactics, we will face annihilation. The age of the bayonet is over. We are now in the age of the shotgun." A call not merely for new tactics, but for a new philosophy. The collapse that followed was not merely tactical. It was a deep, psychological unraveling that infected the ranks. The diary of Lieutenant Kenji Ishikawa, recovered after the war from a cave on Peleliu, traced this inner journey with heartbreaking clarity. A journey shared by thousands, who saw their core beliefs rendered obsolete. June 1943. The Americans rely on their machines because they lack true warrior spirit. This is their weakness. When we close to sword range, as we always do, they will break, as they always have. Their machines cannot save them from our resolve. Our will is stronger than their steel. By September, the tone shifts. A crack of doubt appearing, born of horrific loss. Sato's entire company was destroyed last night near the river. The few survivors speak of thunder weapons that kill 5 men with a single shot. This cannot be true. It must be a story to cover failure of spirit. Yet the men who say this are not cowards. They are veterans. What is happening? And then, November 1943, after Bougainville. I have seen the thunder guns with my own eyes. They do not kill 5 men. They destroy them. They erase them. There is no honor in this death. No chance for glory. No test of courage. The thunder guns have broken our spirit, not with fear, but with futility. We have been training for a war that no longer exists. That was the ultimate defeat. The moment a soldier realized his sacrifice was meaningless. On the other side of the line, the men wielding these thunderous weapons carried their own burdens, their own scars, etched deep beneath the surface. Letters home from Marine Sergeant Dale Miller, a farm boy from Ohio, show the same transformation, from youthful innocence to weary trauma. August 1942. Mom, you won't believe it, but we've got shotguns like Dad's for ducks back home. They work real good in the jungle. Makes you feel safe. Don't worry about me one bit. It's just like hunting back in the woods. By December 1943, the tone had darkened. The boy replaced by a man who had seen too much. I shot a Jap officer last night. He was just a kid, younger than Tommy. I saw his face in the muzzle flash. The buckshot nearly cut him in half. I know they're trying to kill us, and I know I had to do it. But God, what these guns do to a man. Sometimes I wake up seeing their faces, all of them. Tell Dad I understand now why he never talked about the trenches in the last war. This is something you can't forget. The weapon that kept him alive also gave him nightmares. Corporal Hiroshi Yamada, one of only 11 survivors from a company of 150 men on New Georgia, was interviewed in 1987, 40 years later. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. His eyes looked at a place only he could see. The war had never ended for him. "I was in the third rank when the thunder started," he whispered. "The men in front of me, they just came apart. It was not like being shot. It was like being dissolved. I felt a wetness on my face. It was the blood and tissue of my sergeant, a man I loved like a brother. I fell and played dead for 6 hours, lying under their bodies, listening to the Americans move through the jungle. Even now, I cannot hear a clap of thunder without returning to that night. The war ended for me there. Though my body fought for 2 more years, my soul died in that jungle." The voice of a man whose very being had been fractured by sound. Decades later, Honolulu, 1975. Marine Jim Patterson, who had carried his own silence for years, attended a veterans conference. There, he met Tetsushi Ogawa, a man who had once led a banzai charge against Patterson's position on Saipan. 2 men, bound by seconds of violence, now stood face to face in peace. Through a translator, the old Japanese soldier approached him, back straight, eyes heavy with years. "You," he said quietly, "you were the one with the shotgun at Hill 27. Patterson nodded. Ogawa bowed deeply. It was a bow of acknowledgement, of closure, of shared suffering. "You killed my entire squad in seconds," Ogawa said. "I hated you for 30 years. It kept me alive. But now, I thank you. Your thunder gun ended our madness quickly. My friends died instantly. There was no suffering. You saved us from a doctrine that valued death over life. The memory of destruction became an act of mercy." Patterson's daughter remembered what came next. "Dad just stood there," she said. Then the tears came. These 2 old men who had tried to kill each other were hugging and sobbing in the middle of that hotel. Dad never talked about the war before that. That night he told me everything. He said the shotgun was both the best and worst thing that ever happened to him. It kept him alive, but it gave him nightmares for the rest of his life. He and Mr. Ogawa wrote letters every month until Dad died. 2 men from opposite sides of the world, bound forever by the understanding that war makes victims of everyone it touches. A story that rose beyond history, into a universal lesson on the cost of conflict. By the time of the invasion of Peleliu, September 1944, the transformation within the Japanese Army was complete and official. The Marines of the 1st Division, veterans of Guadalcanal and Cape Gloucester, landed expecting the familiar pattern. Fierce resistance on the beaches, followed by the massive, suicidal banzai charges that, while terrifying, always ended the same way. In slaughter under American firepower. They had a playbook, and they expected the enemy to follow it, but the charges never came. Instead, they met a new, more deadly kind of enemy. Colonel Kunio Nakagawa, a brilliant, pragmatic, ruthless commander, had absorbed new orders from General Sadai Inoue that would have been unthinkable a year before. Spiritual strength alone cannot overcome American material and firepower. Each soldier will fight to the death from prepared, deeply fortified, mutually supporting positions. There will be no banzai charges. You must make the Americans come to you and bleed them for every inch of ground. It was a total repudiation of the offensive spirit that had defined the Army, an admission that their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. A captured tactical manual dated October 1944 stated the new reality. Night attacks against enemy positions equipped with automatic weapons and shotguns result only in useless death and the rapid degradation of combat power. They are strictly forbidden. Forbidden. The word ended an era. The tactic that had won an empire was now obsolete. American intelligence, monitoring Japanese radio traffic, heard the change immediately. Major Frank Stevens noted in his report, "Their language of honor and dying for the emperor has been replaced by desperate requests. They ask Tokyo for counter-shotgun tactics, for ways to fight beyond the Thundergun's reach. They seek weapons that do not exist." The enemy had abandoned philosophy, and now begged for technology. The irony was cruel. By discarding their banzai charges, the Japanese had accidentally created a more efficient defense. No longer could Marines mow down waves with shotguns and machine guns. Now they had to fight inch by inch, through caves, pillboxes, and tunnels, with flamethrowers, grenades, and bare hands. Paliliu, which should have been swift, became a 2-month nightmare of grinding attrition. American casualties soared. The shotgun had been so effective. It forced the enemy to evolve into something even more resilient. The weapon designed to end fighting quickly had prolonged the agony. That was the tragic, unexpected legacy of the Thunder in the Jungle. A lesson in the unpredictable consequences of technological supremacy. The weapon won the battles, but in doing so, it transformed the war itself. The Thunder had spoken, and in its echo, centuries of warrior tradition were silenced. The spirit that once believed a blade could conquer a bullet was buried beneath the jungle soil of Bougainville and Paliliu. The men who survived, on both sides, carried that sound inside them for the rest of their lives. War is not fought only with weapons. It is fought with beliefs. And when those beliefs die, something in humanity dies with them. The shotgun's roar ended the age of Bushido, and ended the illusion that courage alone could stand against industry. The Americans won the night, and in doing so, they inherited its darkness. The Thunder in the Jungle still echoes, not in gunfire, but in the silence that follows. The silence of lessons learned too late, and of men who came home carrying ghosts. In the end, every weapon that promises salvation also writes its own curse, and every victory leaves behind its echo.